are going to put out of operation many of these gambling companies. Because first of all, they have not even paid taxes, others have not respected the law, and because they have been playing some games which they can't play anymore. We will follow through on what we said earlier. We have looked at that, the board presented that yesterday, I saw that. There are so many of those companies we have now put on the watch list, others we need investigations. We will not renew licenses of quite a number of them because we want to sort out this problem in our country.
Kenyans need to know, for example, that betting and sport pesa only paid close to 10 billion in taxes in 2018. Taxes from these two industry players formed a big percentage of the taxes collected. The allegations that they have not been paying taxes are baseless and unfounded.
In 2018, Kenya Revenue Authority awarded SportPesa a certificate of award for being the best taxpayer for 3 years in a row. Several months later, we are saying that these taxes that were not received by these companies. So did KRA tell us the truth last year when they said that this betting company was the best taxpayer in this country? Secondly, we need as a country to be consistent in our laws and in our regulations. We cannot claim that a business is legal today and then tomorrow it becomes illegal.
This betting was assisting in provision of employment. Those people who are employed in various betting companies, those people are now jobless. Where will they get jobs? The youths that were using this opportunity to pay fees, where will they get the money from? We know well that the law dictates that there's a rule called Nemo Dat Quote Habed that says that you can never spend what you don't have and you can never pickpocket a naked man. This is a willing buyer, willing seller thing.
This is willing buyer, willing seller, the gambling dilemma in the Republic of Kenya. That is the conversation we're having this evening. So in July this year, the Betting and Licensing Control Board declined to renew the licenses of 19 betting firms, pending security vetting of the operations and their directors as well. That was after Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i directed that all companies involved in gaming be vetted afresh and gave a deadline for the firms to pay the taxes they owe the government. And today, 12 members of parliament have strongly condemned the decision by the government to revoke the operation licenses of some of the betting companies. And that is a conversation we're having this evening. So let me just set the stage for you. At the time when this conversation was just kicking off, I remember Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i said, and I quote, "There is no country that ever grew its economy on betting and gambling. We must bring sanity to this country. As a country, we are not to sit and watch as our children get spoilt in the altar of some forms of evil capitalism. We must act." So those are the sentiments of Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i, quite adamant, saying there are hundreds of lives, if not thousands, that have been destroyed by betting in the country. So which way for the Republic of Kenya in terms of betting? Let's have this conversation with Benny Kanyonge, who's from Advocate Center for Sports Law. We'll also be speaking to Cleophas Malala, who's Senator Kakamega County. At some point, we'll also be speaking to Jakoyo Midiwo, former Game Member of Parliament. But for now, let's bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who's joining us from our City Center studio. Sophia, good evening. So we had a couple of members of parliament today just giving a press statement, and there were several reasons they were saying. Guys, you have hundreds of jobs that will be lost with the betting firms now shutting down. And I mean, Babu Owino at some point saying, "There's a willing buyer, willing seller, guys. You can't do this." And if at all we are cancelling the licenses of these companies, then we have to cancel licenses across board. You can't tell us this one is licensed, this one is not licensed. And at the end of the day, they alluded to some interference, quote unquote, basically saying there's someone who's misadvising the president. The president is being given information that is is quote-unquote inaccurate, and perhaps there's need to reconsider this. You remember at some point in the UK Parliament as well, this conversation was had, and the members of Parliament there were quite concerned about the happenings on betting in the Republic of Kenya. At some point, they're saying this needs to be controlled. There's several lives that are being destroyed. So as I wait for Sophia Wanuna, who's a lead reporter, let's speak to Benny Kanyonge, who's an advocate from Center for Sports Law. Sir, if you can hear me. So the back and forth between the government and the betting companies today, members of parliament just calling for a press and saying this really is not fair, it's an injustice. I mean, if you're cancelling operation licenses for some companies, then cancel for everyone else. So as a sports lawyer, just listening to the side of the betting firms and listening to the side of the government, with the government saying these guys are not paying taxes, lives are being destroyed, what comes to mind?
Thank you, Linda. So you have different actors here. You have the government, which has a primary responsibility to regulate gambling and basically regulate public affairs. And then you have Parliament, as ably represented by the members of Parliament who've you've just shown at the presser, who have a responsibility to oversight government functions and government decisions. And then you have the private sector, in this case represented by the betting companies. Essentially, these ones are private companies which are carrying out business as is allowed by the law, but also who, interestingly, are coming in to fill a gap, perhaps a gap that has been left by government. Which is coming up with money that, if properly invested, then is good for the development of, among other sectors, the sporting sector in this country. So it's a push and pull between all these three. In my opinion, I think from the onset, I think ordinarily it should be a normal push and pull aimed at settling towards proper regulation, as well as giving the space that enables this industry to thrive and serve the good that it can for the Republic of Kenya generally.
I actually love that point that you're saying we need to have proper regulation. And I mean, it's not just Kenya where these regulations are there. In the UK, such regulations are there. Kenya is not the only country that has betting firms operating. So how different is it out there? And what sort of regulation do you think we need to put on the ground so as to allow these betting companies to still operate, but in a regulated environment?
I mean, certainly, Linda, regulations are all over the world. I guess the biggest country when it comes to sports, as far as we are concerned, would be the UK. So the UK has a document known as a gaming code, in addition to several other laws, which basically is a document that through which an organization known as the Gaming Commission implements various guidelines on betting and gambling. Now, this code is very, very interesting. It's very elaborate in its provisions on issues of socially responsible gambling, restricted times for gambling for certain kinds of products, the messaging as gambling goes live, either during prime time, etc., issues of sports sponsorship. And so we're not new to this, and there's a lot that we can borrow internationally as far as regulations on gambling are concerned. Interestingly, when you look at that gambling code from the UK, yeah, it gives certain requirements. For example, it gives a requirement that a website by a gambling company or a betting company must have prominently a link to a website that focuses on responsible gambling, that highlights dangers of gambling, that puts it out there that gambling indeed can be addictive, and even provides a helpline that allows people who have such an addiction or are at the danger of having such an addiction to then call in and say, I have a problem, I need help, kindly assist. So that is how elaborate this process can get. And my belief is that the only way we can get to to that kind of level is if all stakeholders are involved in the processes. So that at least the lingering questions around whether any decisions that have been made have been done without consultation, whether they've been arbitrary, whether they're unfair, whether they're likely to cause an injustice, whether they're likely to lead to job losses, etc. Then those are the issues that can be put on the table and decisions made eventually for the good of the wider public.
Yeah, and just listening to members of parliament today in the afternoon, that is one of the reasons they raised. They said, look, this is going to lead to job losses. And at the end of the day, this is a willing buyer, willing seller. And you're saying perhaps we need to have a conversation that includes all stakeholders so that we don't get to a point where we have an injustice. So just before we get there, let me now bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who's joining us from our City Center studio. Sophia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Linda.
Okay, so in studio, I have Benny Kanyonge, who's an advocate from Center for Sports Law. He says, I mean, it's okay to get sports and betting companies regulated. It happens across the world. He's giving a specific example of the UK, saying they have certain things they've put on the ground. They have a gaming code, they have a gaming commission, and there's certain aspects of it that actually controls how these betting companies are working. And I know that where you are, you have Embakasi East Member of Parliament, Babu Owino, who was part of the members of Parliament who gave that presser today in the afternoon. And according to them, they're saying, look, we have more to lose if we do not allow these betting companies to continue with the operations.
Indeed. Good evening, Linda. So this is a subject that we have seen play out in the media for some time now. So that press conference earlier today by about a dozen members of parliament calling for the reinstatement of the licenses to the betting firms that were withdrawn is coming following numerous tough talk from the government led by the Interior Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Matiang'i, talking about the decay in the moral fabric that has been caused by these betting firms and the gambling. Remember, at the time, we were talking about 500,000 youth blacklisted by lending firms just because of their engagement and lack of payment of the same. So what we're talking about here is 200 billion shillings is what the CS announced a few months back of revenues collectively of the betting firms last year alone. 60 billion shillings is what they are looking to recoup in as far as tax, withholding of tax is what it's called, for that period of time between 2014 and 2019. So these lawmakers coming out to say it's offering jobs, the sponsorships, and as far as the sporting teams are concerned, and all, making that case for reinstatement of this licenses. But remember, this is a matter as well before court. In fact, what SportPesa said and argued was that because the High Court had already given interim orders asking the Betting Control and Licensing Board to reinstate those licenses pending the hearing and decision of determination of that matter so that they continue operating as the same is canvassed, that this is now a government operating outside the law and that they're in breach even of the rights of the betting companies. The big players there being SportPesa and Bet-In, but amongst other 25 other companies that saw their licenses withdrawn. So I have with me the Embakasi East Member of Parliament to talk a little bit more about just what it is they are calling for. Thank you, Babu Owino, for making time for us. So part of what I heard you say a little bit earlier was that this has created employment. However, many would argue at the end of the day, and as far as sponsorship, employment is merely a drop in the ocean. The implication and the adverse effects it has had on the youth and the economy cannot be foretold, that this cannot be compared at all. I'll play the devil advocate tonight.
Thank you very much, Sophia. First, I agree with the Cabinet Secretary's statement when he first said that betting is quite addictive and that it has caused some of the negative implications among our youth. Then the Cabinet Secretary goes ahead, ensures that some of the funds are banned, are blocked out because of allegedly not paying tax evasion. Then the Cabinet Secretary goes further and allows some of the betting companies to be into play like the Bet Lion. What does that tell you? There's double standards. Number two, if it is about tax evasion...
Let me push on that. How is that a double standard? If the argument is these ones have paid or have agreed on a repayment of the taxes they've quote-unquote withheld, these other ones maintain they've paid their taxes. How is that a double standard?
Because the cabinet secretary was of the opinion that betting is addictive and is not good for our youth in the society. That everybody agrees. Then, why should he ban some and allow some to operate?
Because they've paid taxes?
If at all he's saying that this thing is addictive to the youth and destroying the lives of the youth, then he should ban all. He should not allow some, whether they pay taxes or not, to bring the moral decadence. Number two, if at all he's banning anything that comes with immorality, then nightclubs should be banned. Alcohol should be banned. Smoking should be banned. So it's not an idea of that this one is bringing some moral decadence and this one is bringing some immorality. So I learned as a first-year law student that something moral is not necessarily illegal, and vice versa is also true. That's why a person smoking cigarette, to me, it might be immoral. But to you, the person smoking it, it's moral to you. So by the end of the day, I don't think if the cabinet secretary's interest is to save the youth in the nation, because if it were, then he should have banned all the betting companies. Number two, it is not about tax evasion. Several times we've been told, we've been informed by companies like SportPesa, and we've seen KRA itself last year gave an award to SportPesa for being tax compliant. What has happened between last year and now? And these people are insisting that they've been paying taxes. So to me, I think it's just a game of personal interest, where let us allow our firm to take charge, to take the monopoly of betting as we make our profit, and send away other firms, block them from operating. I talked about employment, creation of jobs. These firms have different shops all over the nation. A company like SportPesa have 200 firms. If each 200 shops. If each shop is employing only 500, five youth or 5 people, that's how many people?
But
that's 1,000.
That's 1,000.
So, and other companies are doing also the same. So if these 1,000 people loses job only from one betting firm, what are we going to do? How are we going to give them jobs? Yeah. How are we going to create job employment opportunities for them?
But isn't that countermanded? Okay.
Number three. So on the issue of sponsorship, these people have been sponsoring various sports, from boxing to football. Now, once they withdraw, what are we trying to do? Already, our nation is a nation where sports is loved so much by the youth, but not appreciated by those who are in leadership. It's not appreciated by the government itself. We want to produce more Marigas, more Liech. We want to produce more Wanyamas, more Volungas. But how will you produce these people if at all we are killing the spirit and the morale of our players?
So let's go one by one to the question of employment, because the argument of that would be, yes, there are those manning these shops, but at the end of the day, largely betting occurs online. They will use their mobile phones, they will bet. 99% would be argued is losses. It's very rare. You don't have wins more compared to losses, isn't it, when it comes to betting? That's number one. But the impoverishment, the broken families, the suicides, the blacklisting of 500,000 youth, don't you think there's worse implications in as far as Kenya's economy? And we had the CSA, a country cannot grow its economy off of betting and gambling.
Let me tell you something. Just the other day, our president went to China to look for more money, but the Chinese government refused to give them money. Last year alone, betting firms gave this government over 10 billion as tax, which means that they are also benefiting this nation. They are part of the growth of the economy. We are not just being objective with this thing. We are just fighting this thing blanketly because we want to make money for ourselves. There's still some personal interest for it. When we are talking about jobs, as much as it is online, there are those people operating. There are those people organizing how these things should be done. Those people are losing their jobs. There are shops that we must accept that exist, that are being run by people in the nation who are employed by these betting firms. Countries like the countries in the UK, they have betting firms like Betway, BetPower. There are also youths there, which is true. Do we want to say that those youths are not growing, the countries are not growing because of the betting firms? The reason why we have the cabinet secretary and the board for betting is solely to put control, the measures, to ensure that at least when this thing is being run, when this farm is being run or the farms are being run, there are measures and control so that we ensure that the youths are not that addicted to this betting. Yeah. So that we ensure that money remitted to the government at least by the fact that the government said that winners should be taxed a specific percentage. At least those are some of the control measures that the government put.
Yeah.
So we need not go beyond and start saying that when this thing happens, this will happen. Everything is addictive, including sex. And
now, to the point you're making about sponsorships, many would argue, yes, they have sponsored several teams and sporting activities here in the country, but it's merely a drop in the ocean. When you look at, for instance, sponsorships of teams like Everton, when you're talking about EPL, so that it is barely nothing to the bigger picture of the capacity that SportPesa has. And that is why those then in authority would argue we're not getting value for money. We're not getting more for a company that's domiciled and based here in as far as what they're taking away. There's flight of capital.
I don't disagree with that. But let us also look at the money that these betting firms are giving the government. Billions of shillings.
Government wants more.
Government wants more, which these people have no objection about it. Number two, this thing is a willing buyer, willing seller. That's why I talked earlier and said there's a rule called the nemo dat quod habet rule, that you can't spend what you don't have. You cannot pickpocket a naked man. You only spend what you have. If I want to bet, I want to bet. I used to be addicted so much, and betting at times helped me pay my school fee when I was taking my undergrad degree. And at least I used to win, I used to lose. But it was my decision. It was a decision that I need to bet or I don't need to bet. I wasn't forced to do it. Okay?
Yeah. Final question. There are many watching that press conference earlier and saying those 12 members of parliament are on the payroll of SportPesa. They have been paid to sit there and make a case for them because these are matters before court. They will not be decided by press conferences or any shouting or even the demonstrations you threatened to organize next week. So, umelipwa?
A matter before a court of law is only sub judice if I'm served. The last I checked, I was a lawyer and I'm a lawyer. I've not been served. So
those who believe you've all been paid to make bidding for SportPesa.
Just wait. I can comment before that matter so long as I'm not served. Number two, I'm the Secretary General for Kenya Young Parliamentarians. I speak and I'm the voice for the youth in this nation. So when I see a wrong, I correct it. I don't fight a wrong with another wrong. So I've seen a wrong that the government is doing. I have to speak. I'm the voice of the voiceless, the voice of the youth.
Have you been paid?
On the issue of the payment, if you want to think that we've been paid, that is up to you. But I've been paid by the youth, the Kenyan citizen, who can't afford to lose this because most of the comrades are even using this betting issue to pay their school fee. So I've been paid by their goodwill.
That's 1%, Honorable Owino. That's 1% of the bigger picture of the damage it's causing finally. It's 1%. The bigger picture, doesn't it worry you as a legislator?
Ever since betting was banned, you've also heard that some people have committed suicide. So it's also causing that. You've heard that some people committed suicide because now they can't afford also their daily bread. So even banning it is an issue.
All right. So final words in terms of legislation, is there a change you seek to make other than the press conference today to make it more clear in what should be taxed?
I think there's a committee that is dealing with that at the National Assembly, and they will handle it when the time comes. For ours, we are going to mobilize people, and I'm urging Gor Mahia fans, AFC fans to come out peacefully and ensure that they remove Matiang'i from office peacefully.
When is that?
We'll communicate.
Thank you very much. Honorable Babu Owino says he's calling on the Gor Mahia fans to peacefully, as he says, come out and demonstrate against this decision to keep some of the betting firms out of operation. These are matters before court. As to what happens in due course, we'll wait to see, Linda.
Yeah, he says he's going to organize a peaceful protest. Gor Mahia and... Okay, supporters of Gor Mahia and some football clubs as well, just to see if they can get to the end of it. But the one thing that I keep asking myself, Sophia, when they're holding the press briefing and they're saying it's not about taxes, did any of them ask for proof that these companies have actually paid taxes? That is the question that I really would like to know. Sophia, can you hear me? Are you still with me? Okay, I seem to have lost Sophia there because that is a question. Actually, I think I know who I'll ask that question to. So you're watching The Big Story. Thank you so much for staying with us. Right now, I'd like to bring in Cleophas Malala, Kakamega Senator, if he's with us. He's joining us from Kakamega. Senator, good evening. Thank you for speaking to us on The Big Story. So you had a presser today in the afternoon, and you're calling for the licenses of some of these betting firms to be reinstated. Interior CS Fred Matiang'i at some point said, we cannot allow betting firms to destroy the lives of young men and women in the country. And that question that I wanted to ask Sophia is the one that I'll pose to you. You guys held a press briefing today, and you said it's not about taxes. There's a sinister motive in all this. Did any of you look for any documentation just to clarify that these betting firms have indeed paid their taxes?
Linda, if your memory serves you right,
it should.
I am the one who took this matter to Senate, and I'm the one who raised a question on the floor of the House to question as to why the licenses had not been renewed. And in the response, I happened to sit in the committee that is looking into this matter, being the person who asked that question. So I have the privilege to look into the documents which have been submitted to the committee, and I want to state here categorically that these betting firms, Betting, SportPesa, had even been issued a KRA tax compliance certificate for 2018-2019. Their certificate is valid up to 2019 December. And therefore, that is proof enough that these companies have been paying taxes. Second, I think I want to disagree with the CS for Interior, CS Matiang'i, on his utterances about the perception of betting. If Matiang'i wants to deal with betting, then he should deal with it entirely and not selectively. As you realize right now, Linda, we are having betting firms which are operating. We are having almost 25 betting firms which have been licensed to operate. Betting is still going on in this country. But some selected companies have been denied licenses, despite even the efforts of going to court and getting injunctions. And therefore, we do not want this matter to be handled selectively. Let this matter be handled entirely and once and for all. Okay.
So as an individual or as a representative who sits in the Senate, you're saying you've seen documents to the fact, supporting the fact that betting and SportPesa and some betting companies as well are tax compliant, and so you do not understand why their licenses were withdrawn in the first place.
Yes, I think the stalemate comes in with the interpretation of what a winning is supposed to be defined. And I think KRA are just being unreasonable.
Why are they being unreasonable?
Because KRA wants to tax, because they want to tax the stake, the capital, plus the winning. You know, Linda, if you have money in your M-Pesa account, you cannot be taxed money that you've deposited in your M-Pesa account. That is your saving. And therefore, it is unreasonable for KRA to tax somebody who has put a stake of 1,000 shillings, won 100 shillings, and you want to tax the entire 1,100. What should be taxable is that winning of 100 and not the entire 1,100.
Okay. Stay with me. I need to take our first break on The Big Story. When we come back, we'll also engage Benny Kanyonge, an advocate at Center for Sports Law. Stay with us on The Big Story. We'll be back in a few minutes.